Welcome to this explainer. We're going to jump right in today. We are looking at a case from the spring of 1999 that remains, without a doubt, one of the most infamous and widely discussed criminal investigations in Hong Kong's entire history, the Hello Kitty murder case. Now, you might be thinking about that name. We're dealing with a really profound paradox here, right? The name itself sounds almost absurdly innocent, heavily rooted in pop culture and childhood, yet it masks a reality that is deeply disturbing. Throughout this explainer, we're going to move past those sensational headlines that completely dominated the international media at the time. Our goal is to uncover the very real human tragedy behind the name, figure out exactly what happened, and honestly, examine the uncomfortable truths this case revealed about our society. Section 1. A city's dark underworld. Okay, let's dive into this by setting the scene of the late 1990s. So back in the late 90s, Hong Kong was very much a city of two different sides. On the surface, it was this bustling global city. We're talking a thriving economic powerhouse, a towering skyline, and densely packed, vibrant streets where millions of people just went about their daily lives. But hidden in the shadows was a stark contrast, a criminal underworld driven by organized crime groups, commonly known as triads. Now, the average resident might literally never interact with these networks, but their influence was absolutely pervasive in certain pockets of society. And it was right there, within the shadows of this underworld, that our tragedy began. Section 2. The disappearance of Fan. This brings us to the human heart of our story. Behind that infamous moniker was a real person. When we trace the life of 23-year-old Fan Man Yi, you really start to see a picture of systemic vulnerability. Her childhood was marked by severe instability. She spent part of her early years in institutional care after being abandoned by her family. And without that foundational support system, her early adulthood was fraught with financial insecurity, which ultimately pushed her toward work in the city's nightlife industry. By the time she was a mother, she was struggling heavily to support herself and her young son in what was a highly unforgiving environment. It's a tragic trajectory, and it illustrates how marginalized individuals are exposed to compounded risks over a long period. Then, in March of 1999, Fan became involved in a financial dispute with individuals connected to that criminal underworld we just talked about. Shortly after, she simply disappeared. And this dispute didn't end with a simple confrontation. Fan was actually taken to an apartment in Tsim Sha Tsui. Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. Tsim Sha Tsui is an incredibly busy shopping and entertainment district. It is densely packed. Yet behind the walls of a tiny apartment in this highly populated area, Fan was held captive. This wasn't a crime of sudden panic either. As prosecutors later outlined, she endured a prolonged, horrific ordeal stretching over weeks. In a city of millions, a missing, vulnerable adult can easily go unnoticed. For a terrifying stretch of time, literally no one realized what was happening right in the middle of this bustling district. Section 3. The shocking investigation unfolds. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the crime finally came to light. It's truly unbelievable. Because for months, the truth just stayed buried. The breakthrough didn't come from a standard missing persons search. Instead, it came from an incredibly unlikely source, a teenage girl connected to the suspects. Months after Fan disappeared, this teenager actually approached the authorities with an extraordinary account. It was so horrific, so disturbing that, as you might imagine, it initially sounded almost unbelievable to the police. When she first came forward, there was understandably a lot of initial police skepticism. The allegations were just so extreme that seasoned officers reportedly struggled to accept them as credible. But her account contained highly specific details that warranted a closer look. That led police to physically examine the Tsim Sha Tsui apartment, where forensic teams painstakingly went through the scene. And the sheer volume of physical evidence and witness statements they uncovered undeniably confirmed that a major, prolonged crime had indeed taken place. It was during this exact investigation that the grim detail emerged, the one that gave the case its name. Evidence related to the victim's remains was found concealed inside a large Hello Kitty-themed doll. The contrast between this globally recognized symbol of childhood innocence and the dark reality of a gruesome crime scene was just deeply unsettling. This specific detail instantly captured international media attention. Journalists from all over descended on Hong Kong, and the story sparked a worldwide media frenzy. It essentially guaranteed the case would not quickly fade from public memory. Section 4. The trial and verdict. With all of that evidence gathered, the case eventually moved to a packed courtroom, operating under the intense scrutiny of the public and the press. The crucial point in the trial really came down to complex legal definitions. The prosecution faced a massive hurdle here. Because of the condition of the physical evidence recovered from the apartment, establishing the exact definitive cause of death proved extremely difficult. To put that in perspective, a murder conviction under these legal standards generally requires absolute proof of an intent to kill. Manslaughter, on the other hand, involves an unlawful killing, but without that same strict level of proven intent. Because of that evidentiary limitation, the principal defendants were convicted of manslaughter, not murder. The court ruled that while the defendants were undeniably responsible for Fan's death, the strict legal threshold to prove explicit intent to kill beyond a reasonable doubt just couldn't be met. Now, the defendants did receive lengthy prison sentences, but as you can guess, this verdict generated immense public debate. Some felt the law was applied correctly based on the physical evidence they had, while others fiercely argued the horrific circumstances demanded the harshest possible conviction. Section 5. A tragic legacy endures. And this brilliantly illustrates that the case is far more than just a closed legal file. The trial ended, sure, but the conversations were really just beginning. The broader social implications of Fan Manny's death are stark. This isn't just a sensational true crime story. It's a stark warning. Commentators correctly pointed out that Fan's tragic trajectory highlights severe poverty and financial insecurity. It highlights deep social inequality, the unchecked influence of organized crime on vulnerable populations, and devastating gaps in social support systems. Actually, when you think about it, when someone like Fan, who lacked a strong support network from childhood, falls through the cracks, they are exposed to the highest level of risk. Her story is fundamentally about how a society can fail its most marginalized members long before a crime ever takes place. It's been more than 25 years since the spring of 1999, yet this case continues to captivate researchers, journalists, filmmakers, and the true crime community. It endures not just because of the bizarre details, but because it forces us to look at the uncomfortable intersection of vulnerability and extreme violence. It absolutely demands that we remember the human being behind the headlines. Which leaves us with a vital question to think about. How does society protect its most vulnerable members today? Have we closed the gaps in our social support systems that Fan fell through over 25 years ago? I want you to look beyond the sensational headlines we started with and really consider our collective responsibility to those living on the margins. Thank you for joining me for this explainer.